Hi, Professor McGuire here. I'm here to talk to you about the max interval problem. We've been using it for the past few weeks. We're about to move on to other things. And this is just sort of a wrap up as much as anything else. So, the max interval problem, you may have noticed, was an interesting problem in the sense that we were doing programming exercises, of course, but there was this overriding thread of algorithmic improvement. Started with O3, we moved to O2, then made improvements beyond that. It's part of that's because the max interval problem has an interesting history. It actually wasn't proposed, or I shouldn't say it that way. What I'll say is that the original motivation for solving the problem wasn't 1D at all. It was actually 2D. There was a gentleman named Ulf Grenander in the late 70s who was working on image processing and wanted to do max interval for a two-dimensional image. You might say, well, why would someone want to do that? Let's say you were trying to find a bright spot on an image, or you're subtracting two images. You want to find the maximum, difference as it's represented in intensity or something like that. There's a lot of reasons to want to do a 2D max interval. I would imagine that Tesla and Uber in their cars are using it on either images or sub images. So we have Professor Bernander, who's using, of course, in the 70s, the computing wasn't what it is today. So he's faced with this O6, algorithm, and wanted to improve it, and thought that his chances of getting input on it would be better to formulate it as a 1D problem rather than a 2D problem. So he pitched it to the algorithmic community as a 1D problem, and then just wanted to see what he got, what sort of feedback he got back, and then he was going to, map that into his image processing. So he actually was the one who took it from the O3 to the O2, and then there was a person, Michael Shamos, who he discussed it with, who took it from I used a method called divide and conquer and took it to an n log n. And so then it existed as n log n for about 2 days or something, because he was very proud of himself, and he should have been. And he was at a technical meeting, and there was a person in the audience named Jborn Kadane, and he described this algorithmic improvement. And Kadane, in what's said to be less than a minute, came up with an order n solution. Shema should be proud, and at the same time, like I said, it didn't last very long. So what is Kadane's solution? Let's go. I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm going to. So you see a sequence, and so the sequence, just as before, we're looking for the max interval, whatever that might be. So what we have here is a bunch of zeros down below, and then this is the running sum. So I can just, if I enter the -2 here, I've brought this -2 into the running sum. So my maximum detected sum is a -2. Now that's not very interesting, because if we have positives and negatives, we know that at least one of our positive numbers is going to yield a max interval that's better than that. But we can still see what's going on here. So we're going to add this -6 into the sequence. And so the -2 alone was still the better candidate, because the sum that it had, and so adding this -6 didn't help things at all. That would have been the max interval so far. So then we put the 2 in. Okay, so now this is our new max interval, as represented by this new maximum sum. And then the -3 comes along and does nothing for us. So that 2 alone still remains the maximum interval. And I made the mistake of adding my 2 here instead of adding my 2 here. And the 3, I think I might be okay, but let's bring the 1 down here, okay? And then we're going to bring the 6, and this is where we see it gets interesting. So this starting interval then has now become the new maximum. And that's really what I'm going to correct these things here to -3 so that it looks good. And then And that's really what's going on. Then is we're keeping track of this max sum so far, and then deciding then between abandoning what our current sum is and going with a different sum. And so, of course, because the rest of these are negatives, this max sum is going to survive. So this will remain our max interval. And so that's what Kadane proposed. And so the what it is it's an example, and Professor Will had mentioned this. It's an example of dynamic programming. I'm going to bring up my uh, camera will focus. Sometimes it focuses if I have some. Yeah, there we go. I give it something interesting. So if I say, what's 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, you're going to say that it's 4. And so I say, oh, but plus 1, what's that? And you say 5. And I say, how do you answer so fast? Well, you knew that was 4, so this is going to be 5. And and that's the idea of dynamic programming, is that we want to remember uh, portions of our algorithm to use for later portions of our algorithm. If we do that, then we don't have to recalculate. There's actually, if I can find it, there's a famous quote by George Santayana. It's those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And you can think of that very true in terms of programming, in the sense that if you're not remembering your calculations, you're going to have to recalculate them. And so we're trading off memory for computations, but that's usually a good trade, especially nowadays. Sure, our computations are cheap, but our memory is way cheap, and so that's really sort of an important lesson. So then there is a paper that you will see. Let me bring that up. So this paper is going to be posted, and it talks about this the 1D max interval, and the proposal of it. Now, the paper is interesting in the sense that so much of this is just completely relevant today, and yet you're going to get, it's the Wayback Machine with respect to computers. So you're going to see a lot of interesting, slow computers. But here's the thing: there's a theory with houses that your stuff expands to fill all available space, and it's true with computers as well. As much as we can look at the computers that are highlighted in this paper and say, oh, those things, it's stones and knives. But at the same time, our problems have gotten bigger. They weren't working on 10 million person video streaming, this sort of thing, back at that time. So our problems have probably intensified far greater than our computing resources. So all of this remains relevant today. The other point that this addresses is the topic of constants are covered, and you can see that that the constants basically go away when you're looking at these extended periods of computation time. Basically all comes down to that end. So that's another point that's interesting. For a point of relevance, the Cray supercomputer that is described in here was the big deal in its day, and it had about I don't know, 1,000th the power of an iPhone 5S. So you get an idea of where we are now. But nonetheless, our algorithmic challenges are that much greater as well. So the author makes a strange comment about the 1D algorithm being a toy. And the reason why he said it's a toy is because it was just a contrived problem. The real problem was the 2D problem. Nobody cared about the 1D problem, but now the 1D, it's used in stock market analysis. It's used in the Genome Project. There's all sorts of reasons that people want to do one-dimensional max interval. It's just they didn't want to do it at that time. It was proposed originally because of this person working on image processing. So last thing I'm going to bring up, let's see, it's right here. So courtesy, Professor Will, there's a max interval Kadane that's on the shared drive. It implements the algorithms, different algorithms, including the Kadane algorithm. And then what we can see is so if we change this to implement the max interval 11 or max interval 1, sorry, and save this, and then I'm going to open a menu W window and over here, and so this is U++, max interval domain, and then we'll limit for, I don't know, 2000. Okay, so it took 3.097 seconds. So then let's go here and comment out, and we'll run the debate algorithm. I'm going to save it, and we'll go here, and I'm going to recompile, and then I'm going to run it, and it ready. So that's the idea. So I hope that you get a chance to take a look at the code, and please read the paper. The paper is very informative, and I hope that you have a good day.